Who's excited to go back to school? I know. Listen, Liquid, I remember the night before. Wow, is this fog still like hitting me? Okay. Well, we're getting spiritual in this house. No, but listen, I remember the night school started, and it was, guys, I'm sorry, I have to just do this because this is still going. All right, there it is. All right, guys, look, I remember every single night, the night before school starts, always being the worst night possible because, you know that feeling that keeps you up at night, like that mix of dread and nervousness and a little bit of sadness all at once, right? Well, I dislike school so much, and now I'm in school again, and I'm going for a master's in a year, but whatever, like, I don't like school anyways. But I hate school so much, I had nightmares about it. Like a few weeks before graduating high school, I had a nightmare that I was being sent all the way back to 5th grade, and I had to go through all of middle school and high school again, and it was the worst. I woke up being like, I can't believe I had to go back to like Hialeah Gardens Elementary. Like, what is this? And I'm just like, and I realized, it's just a dream. But quick question. Raise your hand up for this one. What's your least favorite part about going back to school? Just raise your hands. All right, hold on, raise your hand. I'll call on you. You. Waking up early. Dennis. Hey, no yelling. Math. Wow, I almost heard something else. Math. Right here. Your homeroom teacher. Wow. Yeah, we don't like her. Lucas. Miss Dorsey, whoever she is. Homework. Yeah, bro. Who likes homework? Santi.
When you subbed at my school, like that's happening.
I said least favorite.
Yeah, that's my least favorite.
Your least favorite day was when I subbed at your school. That is crazy. I was a substitute teacher back in the day. All right, Annabelle and then Sarah. Annabelle. Miss Lopez. Wow. That's not nice. Sarah. The people. All right. One more. Logan. The teachers. All right. So, the hallways. I'm hearing all these things. Listen, Liquid, isn't it interesting? All of our answers, homework, Miss Lopez, the hallway, the teachers, Miss Dorsey, when I subbed at the school, whatever. All these answers have one thing in common. It's pretty interesting, is that, when we have homework to do, we got to take the difficult classes, when we have to interact with certain people, you guys know who they are. The truth is that, what we share in common is this pressure that we have to conform to this box, and we have to do these things. We have to do them, and we have to wake up early. We have to go to school, and listen, school is not about just learning math or science, but every day you're being taught what to believe, who to become, and what really matters. And I'm saying all of this because this brings us to this amazing story, and the story of Daniel and his friends. Who knows Daniel? The character of Daniel in the Bible. Some of us know of the story of Daniel in the lion's den, right? Or his friends, Meshach, who else? Come on, I'm testing you guys. What? Meshach, Shadrach, and then Abednego, okay? Right? We hear these guys in the fire, right? And we hear all these stories. But before all those cool stories take place, there is this one story that starts it all. And it's this story of how Daniel and his friends were taken from their homeland into this new world called Babylon. And that's the title of the message, Back to Babylon, as we go back to school. And you'll see the reference in a second. And the Babylonians' main mission was to reshape their identity as they attempted to eliminate anything associated with God. So imagine, they come from a nation that believes in the God Yahweh. And now this nation kind of falls with a series of things that happen. The nation of Israel, they kept sinning. They were turning away from God. And what happens from that is that they get attacked by another nation because God was no longer with them, and they get dragged over here. And Daniel and his friends get taken from their homeland, and now they're put into this place called Babylon. And just so you could get an idea of what Babylon was like, here's 4 things you need to know. Babylon was completely godless. They rejected God. Here's the second thing. They celebrated sin. Third thing, they redefined truth to whatever they wanted to see fit. And here's the fourth thing. They demanded people to conform to their beliefs. And some of you guys are here like, wow, like that sounds a lot like my school. And it's like, yeah, it kind of is. But look, believe it or not, just like Daniel and his friends, every one of you guys walks into a Babylon each school year. The question isn't if you'll face pressure, though. The question is, will you conform to the world around you? You know, Paul says this in the book of Romans. He says, do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. But listen, it's much easier to read this verse and agree with it than to actually live it out, right? Because when we go into school, it's just, there's so much temptation, and there's temptation to kind of conform into what everyone's telling us, what our friends believe. But here's the hope for tonight. That as we go back to school, whether it's on Monday or Thursday, that we could leave here today ready to block out the temptation to conform and living out God's will for our lives as we go back to school. And some of y'all will be like, well, I'm homeschooled. Like, what in the world do I do? And it's like, well, if you're homeschooled, don't worry, because this message still applies, because the world still exists and the temptation to form still exists even within the church. So before we can get to the story, it's really important to know what happened for Daniel's friends to be taken from this place. So let's back up a few hundred years. Who remembers King David? You guys remember King David? Yeah, we've been talking about him a lot these past few weeks. So after the reign of King David, the best king that Israel had, after him there was a lot of bad kings. These kings made terrible decisions after terrible decisions, and these rulers were turned away from God, leading the rest of the nation to turn away from him as well. And for decades, the prophets of God had warned these rulers that their idolatry and their sin is going to lead the nation of Israel into captivity. One of the prophets, his name is Prophet Isaiah. He has a whole book that he wrote, and here's what he says. A century before the fall of Jerusalem, before Daniel and his friends, he says this. Then Isaiah said to Hezekiah, listen to this message from the Lord of heaven's armies. The time is coming when everything in your palace, all the treasures stored up by your ancestors until now, will be carried off into Babylon. Nothing will be left, says the Lord. Some of your very own sons will be taken away into exile, and they will become eunuchs who will serve in the palace of Babylon's king. And that's exactly where Daniel and his friends are a whole 100 years later. And this prophecy comes true. And now the question is, well, what happens to these guys? Are they going to conform to the world around them, or will their faith be a light in a world that's so far away from him? So we're going to be in Daniel chapter 1. It's in your outlines. Or if you have your Bibles with you, you can open up to that. We're going to be in Daniel chapter 1, verse 3. It says this. Then the king instructed Ashpenaz, the master of his eunuchs, to bring some of the children of Israel and some of the king's descendants and some of the nobles, young men, in whom there was no blemish, but good-looking, gifted in all wisdom, possessing knowledge and quick to understand, who had the ability to serve in the king's palace, and whom they might teach language and the literature of the Chaldeans. And the king appointed for them a daily provision of the king's delicacies and the wine of which he drank, and 3 years of training for them, so that the end of that time they might serve before the king. Now from among of those sons of Judah were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. To them the chief eunuchs gave them names. He gave Daniel the name Belteshazzar, to Hananiah Shadrach, to Mishael Meshach, and to Azariah Abednego. Now, as we pause that right there, give me your guys' attention, there are 3 things that we need to prepare ourselves as we go back to school. So here's the first thing. Be prepared to have our identity challenged. See, we look at this story and we see what happens to Daniel and his friends. They get taken from their home and they're brought to the king's palace. And they do this because they see these kids as perfect vessels. They're good looking, they're gifted in knowledge, they have the wisdom, they have the ability to serve the king. But to do this, they put them on a specific diet and 3 years of training. 3 years of education. It's this rigorous course. Afterwards, they were to serve the king. And that educational program included things like architecture, agriculture, astrology, law, mathematics, and the language that the Babylonians spoke of the Chaldeans, which was Aramaic, and their literature language was Akkadian. You guys don't need to know that. But does this sound familiar to you? All these things? Guys, these boys are in school. Like, they were literally put through school. And I say boys and kids, I use that language because that's exactly what they were. Daniel and his friends were 15-year-old kids. They were your guys' age, being put through this 3-year course. It's like, wow, this feels like kind of like high school, agriculture, law, all these academies. And on top of that, they're not only in a new land, but they were being fed new ideas, a new language, new customs, and they were given new names. And before I tell you their names, let me give you their Hebrew names and their meaning. And it's in your notes. It's this full page. I know it's a lot. So if you don't get to it all, it's okay. But here's this so you guys know. Daniel means God is my judge. God is my judge. Then one of his friends, Hananiah, the name Hananiah meant Yahweh is gracious. Mishael, his name was who is like God. And Azariah meant Yahweh will help. All these 4 names, these are beautiful, godly names that they were given. Now, here's what the king does. The king, his name was Nebuchadnezzar. The king of Babylon changed their names to these things. So Daniel becomes Belteshazzar, which is Bel, protect his life. Hananiah becomes Shadrach, which means command of Aku, which was the moon god. Mishael becomes Meshach, which means who is what Aku is. Azariah becomes Abednego, equal, and what that means is that it's servant of Nebo. All these names. Now, if you look at it, if you have it on your outline, study it for a second, and here's what you're going to realize. These are all godly names at the top, and then what King Nebuchadnezzar does is that he changes their names, and they take out the name of God in their lives. They take out the name of God, which is within their names, and he replaces it with gods and idols that the Babylonians worshipped. These fake gods that they put in, and that's what they're being called now. Listen, this culture's stated goal was to disconnect them from the faith of their fathers and to transform these Jewish boys into Babylonians. Their attempt was to brainwash these 4 kids into thinking and living like Babylonians, which were godless people. So let me ask you a question. When you go to school, what name are you carrying? When you go into your Babylon, will you change your name and identify with something else? Because believe it or not, when we go to school, the same challenges take place. The culture around us celebrates sin. It encourages you to lust. It encourages you to use foul language. It encourages hate and division. And if we're not ready, it will eat us alive. Yesterday, I was driving to church. I was driving into the office, and the weirdest thing happened to me. So I live in Weston. I live in an apartment in Weston, and I was driving down. I didn't take the highway for some reason, and I was on Pines Boulevard. That's right where West Broward is and Pines Charter. So I approach this light, and there's like 20 other cars with me. It's like 9 in the morning, and they're waiting on this light to turn green. Well, this light turns green, and a few seconds later, like, kid you not, like less than 5 seconds, it goes back to red. So it's just a spur of a few cars at a time. Well, finally, I get to the front of this line. I'm like, finally, like, okay, I'm next. And I'm sitting there. And guys, I'm sitting there for like 5 minutes, and nothing's changing. I'm like, what is going on? I'm like losing my mind. I've been on this light for a total of like 10 minutes at this point. And out of nowhere, I see this BJ's van kind of cut from behind me, goes into the turning lane, cuts in front of me, and just takes the red light. Like, this guy had enough of it. I'm like, dude, like, this guy's gonna get arrested. And I'm like, what is this guy doing? And I'm kind of freaking out. And of course, I'm like, when there should be a cop, there is no cop. And so I'm talking to myself. I'm like, I can't believe this guy's crazy. And as I'm talking to myself, I look to my right where the other 2 lanes are, and everyone starts going. The light is still red, and people just start taking the red light. I'm like, And I'm just like, what is going on? And everyone starts taking the red light. And so, of course, I'm like, if everyone else is doing it, I'm going to do it. So I slam on the accelerator, and I run the red. And the moment I run the red, I kid you not, a cop turns the corner. And I start freaking out. I'm like, of course this will happen to me. Well, luckily, he didn't stop me because there was too many people running the red light with me. So he comes into the intersection. He cuts everyone off. He gets off, and apparently the light was broken. So he started directing traffic afterwards. But man, after I stopped sweating, I realized something. I realized something very important, is that the moment I saw everyone going one way, I felt the pressure to do the same. Everyone was breaking the law, and I just had the instinct to break the law with them. I was like, I'm just going to run this red because everyone else is doing it. And here's what happens sometimes, not only in school, but in life. There are times when our friends are going one way, our classmates are going one way, and then we too feel the need that we also have to go that one way. And here's the thing, the temptation to conform will always be present. Our identity will always be challenged, but ultimately, we have a free choice to decide what name we're going to bear. Are we going to bear the name of Jesus, or are we going to bear the name of the world? What master will you serve? You can only serve one. And Jesus makes that point in Matthew chapter 6. He says this, no one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you'll be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and your friends. You cannot serve both God and yourself. You cannot serve both God and the world. Choose one. And let me encourage you with this. If you choose Jesus, you will see God do a work like no other. Because that's what Daniel and his friends did. And as we continue with the story, we find out that Daniel and his friends refused to conform with the culture around them. And here's what it says in the following verse. It says, but Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with a portion of the king's delicacies, nor with the wine which he drank. So he refuses to kind of assimilate himself into that culture, and he tells one of the king's workers, being the chief of these eunuchs, he says, listen, like, we don't want to eat and drink those things, just give us vegetables instead. And the chief, he's like, well, my life is on the line here, I'm not going to do that. And he's like, okay, how about this? How about you test us for 10 days? You give us vegetables for 10 days and see what happens then. Well, that's what we read in this following section. In verse 12, we're going to skip down a little bit. It says this, please test your servants for 10 days and let them give us vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then our appearance be examined before you, and the appearance of the young men who ate of the portions of the king's delicacies, and you see fit. So deal with your servants. So he consented with them in this matter, and he tested them 10 days. And at the end of the 10 days, their features appeared better and fatter in the flesh than all the young men who ate the portion of the king's delicacies. Thus, the steward took away their portion of the delicacies and the wine that they were given to drink, and gave them vegetables as well. And here's the second thing that we need to know as we go back into our school, is that we need to be prepared to look different from the rest. Daniel and his friends chose another way. And here's the moral of the story. Guys, eat your vegetables, all right? No, you'll get big and strong. Come on, eat your vegetables. No, I'm playing. That's right. That's not the point. The point is that David and his friends weren't scared to look different from the rest. They chose to single themselves out, and they took the risk of looking weaker. But instead of their features being worse at the end of the 10 days, their appearance was better, and they looked more full than anyone else that they were with in the 10 days that they were training with. And listen, to be fatter in the flesh meant that you were healthier and you were stronger than those around you. Remember, this is ancient times. We don't got like protein shakes out here. Like they have just what they've got, which was just animals from the wild. And they didn't have much of that. See, the chief believed that they would get weaker because of their beliefs, because of what they felt compelled to do. But he didn't know the power that God brings to those who give their whole heart to the Lord. A heart that loves and trusts in the Lord will seek out ways to be bold about their faith without insulting or upsetting anyone. Look how Daniel and his friends respond. They don't start insulting them. It's like, oh, we're not going to eat that trash. That's sinful. He doesn't say any of that. He's like, hey, we don't follow that. We don't eat these meats. Our God forbids us from eating that. Can we just have vegetables? And just test this for 10 days. It's so bold, but at the same time, it's so careful to show the love of Jesus. And listen, it wasn't to call out this nation and call them sinners, right? But they were bold enough to communicate their faith and not let the people around them affect their relationship with God. Liquid, it takes being bold and refusing to compromise to things that will harm your relationship with God. And that might mean that you look different from everyone else. But let me ask you this question. Is that such a bad thing? Is that such a bad thing to look different from the rest of your school? Is that such a bad thing to look a little different from the rest of your friends? Because for Daniel and his friends, they looked different. But they were fuller. They looked healthier and better than the rest of the other teenagers that were in this training course with them. And that goes for you as well. You will look different, but you look more complete. You look more full. There will be this joy about you that's just unexplainable. Who here has heard of the Jesus glow, right? The Jesus glow. I only see girls with their hands up, besides with a few boys, right? And here's the thing. The girls know this because of social media, right? But for the guys, you would call it aura or something, like spiritual aura. I don't know. It's like, dude, this guy has an aura about him. Well, listen, essence. That's a better word. Dude, this guy has an essence about. No, I'm playing. Listen, Jesus glow, auras, essence, whatever, right? It's this term that talks about the inner peace and the kindness that reflects Jesus through a person's daily life. Listen, if we give him our heart, he will change our appearance. We will have that glow to us, and people will start to see us differently, but not in a bad way, but in a way that makes them curious to why you're so passionate about this God that you follow. They'll see the way you react to life and question, how can you be so joyful? That's because when we have been called to the world and tell of Jesus' saving work in our lives. See, when we proclaim the name of Jesus, when we go to camp and we say, hey, I'm going to make this decision, or we just make that decision in our room. When we make that decision, God is calling us out now. And he says, I want you to live out the life that I have set for you to live, because by you living this life out, people are going to look at you and they're going to see me. The Apostle Peter, he says this in one of his letters. He says, but you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his wonderful light. And through Jesus, that's now you and I. We become God's chosen people. We become the ones who proclaim the name of Jesus to our schools. And as we set foot into the world and step foot into our school, that becomes our mission field. That's where we live faithfully. And when at every opportunity, we become bold about our faith and tell the world of what he has done in our lives. Because when Daniel and his friends decided to live differently, it was noticeable. So much so that the others followed suit. And they began doing the same things that Daniel and his friends were doing in hopes of being as full as them. That's the power of living differently. People are going to follow suit. People want to be full. And listen, it's already in you. They're looking to you to be that thing. So people will follow suit. And that's what the Babylonians do. They follow suit. Now they start giving everyone else vegetables. And see what happens next. We're going to go in verse 17, and this is the last thing of tonight. It says this, as for these four young men, God gave them knowledge and skill in all literature and wisdom. And Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams. Now at the end of the days, when the king had said that they should be brought in, the chief of the eunuchs brought them in before Nebuchadnezzar the king. And then the king interviewed them, and among them all, none was found like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Therefore, they served before the king, and in all matters of wisdom and understanding about the king, about which the king examined them. He found them, look at this, 10 times better than all the magicians and astrologers who were in all his realm. And this leads us to the last point of tonight. As we go back into our schools, we need to be prepared to see God move. What does the story of Daniel and his friends tell us? At the end of the days, when they finish their schooling, when it was all said and done, the king interviews everyone, and they found no one like Daniel and his friends. These 4 kids were what? 10 times better than the rest. See, being different was not just a good thing, it was the better thing. But the Babylonians didn't even know it. They didn't even know that it was because God was with them. God was blessing them with wisdom and knowledge, and that allowed them to succeed in Babylon because their hearts, what? Belonged to the Lord, not to Babylon. And this sort of faithfulness is what we need as we head back into our schools. Are we going to be faithful to the point that we're ready to see God move? See, God moves when you move. And tonight, here's what he's asking you to do. He's asking you to move. He's asking you to move into his direction and let your life be proof of all that God has done. Because that's what we've been brought into this world for. You know, here's what Paul says. In his letter to the Corinthians, he makes this special analogy about who we are as Christians. He calls us a letter. The letters that he wrote, he says, you are the letter. He says this, you yourselves are our letter, written on our hearts, known and read by everyone. You show that you are a letter from Christ, the result of our ministry, written not with ink, but with the Spirit of the living God, not on tablets of stone, but on tablets of human hearts. As you walk into school on Monday and Thursday, you're going to be read by everyone. People are watching. And if they know you're a Christian, they're watching even harder. Because they want to know what makes you so different. And if you aren't all that different, there's no reason for them to follow Jesus. So, let me challenge you today and do this. Get connected with your school's first priority. If you don't know what first priority is and you're just like what in the world are you talking about? Almost every school in South Florida has a first priority. It's a club in a school that is determined to spreading the hope of Christ to every student. And let me tell you this, first priority has changed my life. At the age of 15 years old, I was going to Liquid, and man, I was surrounded by all these friends who just put me down every single time. I became a Christian, and 1 week later, they're already making fun of me. And I stuck with these guys for years. And I still love them to this day. It's not like I ditched them. I still love them to this day. But here's the difference. The moment I entered my first priority, I found people who were challenging me to grow in my faith. It's like, hey, you have a really bad tongue. You got to change that, dude. And it's like, and I just felt called out. I was like, okay, I'm a Christian. I get it. Like, I shouldn't be cursing. So, and then every time they will catch me. And that's what Christian friends do. They keep you accountable because they love you. 8 months later, all of them graduate, and they're like, hey, you're going to be the first priority president. And I'm like, what, dude? I'm 8 months new as a Christian. I'm like, got to figure it out. Well, I told you this story at camp. First year, I did nothing. Absolutely nothing. The club didn't grow. First, 8 months, it was just me, Sebi, and yeah, okay. It was me, Sebi, and another guy, right? And just every week, it was just less and less people. And at that moment, there was a day when no one came. And I was like, this falls on me. I'm not telling you to be a first priority president. I'm not telling you to do that. But here's what happens after. I decided, okay, I'm just gonna do what God has told me to do. I'm gonna actually focus on this. I focus on it. The next year comes, and man, by the time I graduate, there's like 50 kids in first priority. They're building each other up. They're building each other up spiritually, and now they're growing. And Hialeah Gardens High School has over 100 kids in first priority, and now there's a community of youth just like you in high school, and it's all because someone decided to make a decision. I'm going to take this seriously. I'm going to invite my friends. I'm going to invest into these Bible studies. I'm going to invest into this curriculum. And here's what happens. These kids are coming to church. They're finding Jesus. And they're finding a community of believers within their school that has so much evil around it. They could go after school and they come in with this group of believers. And now they're building all these friendships, and they're connecting with one another, and they're growing. And some of them are not even church, they don't have a church with them. So then you start inviting them to church, and now you have people that you're going to high school with, you're going to church with, and now you're doing life with. And that's such a beautiful part about what first priority can do.